The mining colony of Kepler 452b had been dying for months, its population bleeding away like sand through fingers. Corporate had pulled the main workforce after the ore veins ran thin, leaving behind only the stubborn, the desperate, and the end. Foolish, perfect hunting grounds for a crow, Zethkar moved through the abandoned streets with the fluid grace of evolution's masterpiece. 8 feet of corded muscle and razor-sharp claws, wrapped in midnight black hide that seemed to absorb the pale light of the system's dying star. Every step was calculated, every breath measured. The Krail had perfected the art of death across 10,000 worlds, and this backwater colony would be no different. The creature's sensory organs, hidden beneath the bony ridges of its skull, painted a detailed picture of the settlement. 17 humans remained, scattered across the industrial complex like wounded animals. Their fear scent clung to the recycled air, sweet and intoxicating. The Krill's mandibles clicked in anticipation. Each human would provide maybe 30 seconds of sport before the inevitable conclusion. Unlike the sterile hunting preserves of the core worlds, this place felt authentic. The prefabricated buildings stood like tombstones in neat rows, their polymer walls scarred by years of asteroid dust and radiation. Broken hover transports littered the main thoroughfare, their hulls split open like cracked eggs. The colony's central spire, once a beacon of human ambition, now flickered with failing power cells. Zethkar paused at the intersection of Mining Street and Depot Row, tasting the air. The scent trails where fresh 2 humans had passed this way within the last hour. One carried the sharp tang of mechanical lubricants, the other the metallic sweetness of medical supplies. Both were alone, both isolated from the pathetic cluster of survivors holed up in the administration building. The Krill's hunting instincts, honed across millions of years of evolution, began their deadly calculations. The medical scent trail led toward the colony's clinic, likely a wounded human seeking treatment. Easy prey, weakened and distracted. The mechanical scent headed toward the supply depot, perhaps a desperate scavenger, gathering resources for the group's inevitable flight. Zethkar chose the depot. Cornered prey fought harder, made the hunt more interesting. The creature's claws extended with soft clicks, each one sharp enough to slice through human bone like paper. Its secondary hearts began their combat rhythm, flooding the system with combat stimulants that turned the world into crystal-clear focus. The supply depot squatted at the colony's edge, a massive prefab structure designed for efficient storage and distribution. Its loading bay doors hung open like a gaping mouth, revealing the darkness within. Perfect. The Krail moved closer, every sense focused on the building's interior. The mechanical scent grew stronger, mixed now with something else. That made the creature's hunting instincts pause. It was human scent, but without the familiar cocktail of fear chemicals. Where there should have been cortisol and adrenaline, there was only the steady, unremarkable odor of calm concentration. The Krill's predatory programming struggled to process this anomaly. In its species' vast experience, prey that didn't fear was prey that didn't recognize the danger, that only made the hunt more satisfying. The depot's interior stretched into shadows, punctuated by emergency lighting strips. Shelves reached toward the ceiling, most empty now, their contents long since distributed or plundered. The air recyclers hummed with mechanical persistence, stirring dust motes in the pale light. Zethkar moved through this maze of metal and polymer with predatory patience, following the scent trail deeper into the structure. The human was in the back section, near the industrial equipment storage. The Krall could hear her now, the soft whisper of fabric against metal, the quiet clink of tools being sorted. No rushed breathing, no elevated heart rate. The creature's confusion deepened. Even experienced prey showed physiological signs of stress when isolated and vulnerable. Zethkar rounded the final corner and found her. She was smaller than most humans, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with the lean build of someone who worked with her hands. Dark hair pulled back in a practical knot, clothing that had seen better days but remained functional. She knelt beside an open supply crate, methodically sorting through spare parts for the atmospheric processors. Her movements were economical, precise someone who had learned to work efficiently in dangerous environments. The Krail settled into hunting position, muscles coiled for the killing strike. At this distance, the attack would be over in seconds. The human's neck was exposed, her attention focused on the contents of the crate. One leap, one swipe of claws, and another successful hunt would be complete. But something made the creature pause. The human's scent profile remained utterly calm, lacking even the baseline stress chemicals that should accompany working alone in an abandoned colony. It was as if she genuinely didn't perceive any danger, despite being isolated and vulnerable. In a place where 17 people had already died, the Krill decided to test her awareness. Moving with liquid silence, Sethkar shifted position, allowing one claw to scrape deliberately against a metal shelf. The sound echoed through the depot's silence like a gunshot. The human's hand stilled for exactly 2 seconds. Then she resumed, sorting parts, apparently dismissing the noise as unimportant. The Krill's hunting instincts recoiled in confusion. Every other species in the galaxy would have at least looked up, investigated the source of an unexpected sound. This human's indifference was almost insulting. Sethkar tried again, this time allowing its breathing to become audible, the deep, resonant rhythm that had sent thousands of prey species into panicked flight. The human paused again, this time, turning her head slightly as if listening. But instead of fear, her posture suggested mild annoyance, like someone interrupted by a noisy neighbor. The Creel's primary brain began rapid calculations. Was the human deaf? Brain damaged? Chemically impaired? None of those explanations fit the evidence. Her movements were too coordinated, too purposeful. Whatever was happening here, it wasn't simple human dysfunction. Moving with infinite care. Sethkar crept closer. The human's scent profile remained maddeningly stable. No fear, no stress, just the calm concentration of someone focused on a task. The creature's mandibles clicked softly in frustration. This was wrong. This violated every principle of predator-prey dynamics that had governed the galaxy for millions of years. 10 feet away, the Krill stopped. At this distance, the human was completely within striking range. One bound would bring Sethkar close enough to rake claws across the soft human neck. The kill would be instant, efficient, satisfying. But the human still hadn't acknowledged the presence of death, crouching mere feet away. She reached for another component, held it up to the light to examine the part numbers, then set it aside. In what was apparently a reject pile. Her breathing remained steady, her heart rate normal. The Krill's confusion transformed into something approaching alarm. This wasn't prey behavior. This was the calm of something that had never learned to fear being hunted. The human's hand moved to her tool belt, fingers closing around something that might have been a sonic wrench. Still without looking up, she spoke into the depot's silence. You? No, most people would have announced themselves by now. Her voice carried the flat, uninflected tone of someone commenting on the weather. No tremor, no elevation in pitch. The Krill's hunting instincts screamed warnings as every tactical assumption collapsed. The human had known. She had known from the moment Sethkar entered the depot. Maybe from the moment the creature had entered the colony, and she hadn't run. The human, her name, was Maya Chun. Though the Krill didn't know this, finally looked up from her work. Her eyes found Sethkar's position with the casual precision of someone who had been tracking movement in her peripheral vision. When their gazes met, something fundamental shifted in the depot's atmosphere. The Kroll saw brown eyes, unremarkable by galactic standards. But behind those eyes, Zethkar glimpsed something that made its entire nervous system recoil. There was no fear, no surprise, no recognition of vulnerability. Instead, there was the calm, measuring gaze of something that was evaluating threat. Levels and response options. It was the look of a predator, sizing up potential prey. Maya had grown up in the Yellowstone Preserve, one of Earth's restored wilderness areas where humans relearned the skills their ancestors had needed to survive on one of the galaxy's most hostile worlds. Her father had been a ranger, her mother a wildlife biologist. She had learned to track before she could read, to hunt before she could drive. More importantly, she had learned to recognize the psychological signatures of apex predators. The creature before her was magnificent 8 feet of perfect evolutionary engineering, designed for killing with ruthless efficiency. But Maya had grown up around grizzly bears and pack wolves, had learned to read the body language of things that could kill her without effort. This alien predator, despite its exotic appearance, broadcast the same fundamental signals. More importantly, it had made the same crucial mistake that had gotten overconfident predators killed throughout Earth's history. It had assumed that physical appearance determined dominance. The krill's sensory organs painted a detailed picture of the human's physiological state. Heart rate, steady. Breathing, controlled. Stress hormones, minimal. It was impossible. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, that prey didn't behave this way, that the natural order was being violated. But Maya wasn't behaving like prey, because she had never learned to think like prey. Humans had spent millions of years as persistence hunters, pack predators who had climbed to the top of Earth's food chain, not through size or strength, but through intelligence, cooperation, and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. They had learned to kill things bigger and stronger than themselves, and that knowledge was written in their genes. The standoff stretched between them, 2 apex predators from different worlds sizing each other up in a primal dance of dominance. The krell's claws extended and retracted reflexively, while Maya's hand remained steady on her tool belt. Neither moved, neither blinked, neither acknowledged the other as anything less than a potential threat. Finally, Maya spoke again, her voice carrying the same conversational tone. "You're beautiful, in your way. Perfect killing machine. But here's the thing about perfect killing machines. They usually forget that prey can evolve too." The krell's mandibles clicked in what might have been confusion or threat. The humans. Words carried implications that its predatory brain struggled to process. My ancestors survived ice ages and volcanic winters. They hunted mammoths with pointed sticks and lived in caves with things that wanted to eat them. They learned to kill because everything else was trying to kill them first. Maya's eyes never left the creature's face. "What did your ancestors hunt?" The question hung in the recycled air like a challenge. Asterisk. The krell's memory banks contained the evolutionary history of its species, passed down through genetic encoding across millions of years. The answer to the human's question was both. Simple and terrible. The krell had never faced true adversity. They had emerged as the apex predators of their homeworld without significant challenge. Their natural advantages so overwhelming that prey species had never developed meaningful defenses. For 10 million years, the krell had hunted, killed, and consumed without ever encountering something that fought back effectively. They had expanded across the galaxy, finding the same pattern repeated on world after world. Prey species that fled, hid, or died, but never adapted to become genuine threats. Maya watched the creature's posture shift subtly, noting the way its claws retracted slightly, the way its breathing pattern changed. She had seen the same response in wolves when they encountered a human who refused to show submission. Confusion, followed by a growing unease as their dominance assumptions were challenged. "You're wondering why I'm not afraid," Maya said, settling. Back on her heels but keeping her hands free, It's because fear is a luxury. On Earth, if you ran from every predator, you'd spend your entire life running. Eventually, you had to learn to make predators afraid of you. The Krail's secondary heart began racing, flooding its system with combat stimulants. But for the first time in its evolutionary history, those stimulants weren't preparing it for a hunt. They were preparing it for a fight against something that might actually be dangerous. Maya reached slowly into her tool belt and withdrew a small device, a standard-issue atmospheric tester. The Krail's muscles tensed, expecting a weapon. Instead, the human activated the device and set it on the floor between them. The soft beeping filled the silence. "Oxygen levels are fine," Maya said conversationally. "Good thing, since we're both breathing it. Common atmospheric requirements mean we evolved on similar worlds. That's interesting, don't you think?" The Krail's confusion deepened. The human's behavior followed no logical pattern. She should be terrified, should be trying to escape or fight. Instead, she was making conversation. "See, the thing about Earth is that it's actively hostile to life," Maya continued, her voice maintaining that same calm, measured tone. "Most worlds either kill you quickly or leave you alone. Earth does both. My ancestors had to survive everything. From megavolcanoes to ice ages, predators that hunted in packs and others that hunted alone. They learned to adapt, to think, to use tools and cooperation to punch above their weight class. The human's eyes never left the Krail's face, reading micro-expressions that the creature didn't even know it was making. You're from a stable world, aren't you? Your evolutionary path was straightforward. Get big, get strong, get fast, get deadly. But you never learned to deal with something that refuses to be prey. The Krail's predatory instincts were in full revolt. Every sensory input contradicted its fundamental understanding of how the universe worked. This small, soft creature should be easy prey. Instead, it was conducting a psychological dissection with surgical precision. Maya reached for another tool. This one actually a weapon, a plasma cutter used for salvage work. The Krail's muscles coiled for attack, but the human simply placed the device on the floor beside the atmospheric tester. She made no threatening moves, showed no aggressive posture. "I'm not going to attack you," Maya said, "but I'm not going to run either." That puts us in an interesting position, doesn't it? The Krail's tactical processors attempted to calculate attack vectors, but every scenario led to the same conclusion. This human was dangerous in ways that defied analysis. She moved with the controlled grace of a trained fighter, spoke with the calm confidence of someone who had faced death before, and most disturbing of all, she showed no deference to a creature that could kill her with a single swipe. "You know what I think?" Maya said, settling more comfortably onto the floor. "I think you're the first of your kind to meet one of mine. And I think you're realizing that the galaxy might be more complicated than you thought." The standoff continued, but the psychological dynamic had shifted. The Krail was no longer the confident predator stalking easy prey. It was an apex predator encountering something unprecedented, a species that had learned to be more dangerous than things that were. Physically stronger, asterisk. Minutes passed in the depot's artificial twilight. Neither creature moved, neither spoke, neither acknowledged defeat. But the psychological landscape had transformed completely. The Krail's hunting instincts, so perfectly calibrated for millions of years of successful predation, now registered only confusion and growing unease. Maya had accomplished something that shouldn't have been possible. She had made an apex predator doubt itself without raising a weapon or issuing a threat. The Krail's sensory organs painted a detailed picture of its own physiological state, and for the first time in evolutionary memory, the readings included stress markers. The human reached for her tool belt again, this time withdrawing a small data pad. She activated it with casual efficiency, the screen's glow casting blue light across her features. Colony census shows 17 humans remaining, she said, scrolling through information. 17 humans who've survived everything this place could throw at them. You picked the wrong world to hunt on. The Krell's mandibles clicked softly, a sign of agitation in its species. The human's words carried implications that its predatory brain struggled to process. These weren't refugees fleeing a dying colony. They were survivors who had chosen to stay, who had adapted to conditions that had driven away thousands of others. We're not the scared colonists you were expecting, Maya continued, her voice carrying a note of something that might have been amusement. We're the ones who stayed when the smart money left. The ones who looked at this hostile rock and decided to make it work anyway. That probably should have been your first clue. The creature's tactical processors began running new calculations, incorporating this revised threat assessment. 17 humans, all survivors by definition, all adapted to extreme conditions. The Krell's confidence in easy prey evaporated. Like water in vacuum, Maya set the data pad aside and met the creature's eyes again. You're welcome to try, she said quietly. But understand what you're really choosing. You're not hunting refugees or merchants or tourists. You're hunting the descendants of persistence predators who learned to kill mammoths with pointed sticks. The Krell's genetic memory contained records of every successful hunt its species had ever conducted. Millions of kills across thousands of worlds, all following the same pattern: locate prey, stalk prey, kill prey, consume prey. Simple, efficient, effective. But none of those records contained anything like this small human who refused to acknowledge her place in the food chain. 4. The first time in its evolutionary history, the Krell experienced uncertainty. Not about its physical capabilities. It could certainly kill this human, probably within seconds. But about the consequences of that action. About what would happen when the other 16 survivors learned that their kind had been hunted. About whether these humans might be the first species to actually hunt back. Maya seemed to sense the creature's internal struggle. You know what the really scary thing is? She said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I'm probably the least dangerous human in this colony. The others have been here longer, adapted more completely. They've learned to think of this place as home, and they don't take kindly to things that threaten their home. The Krell's secondary hearts began racing again, but this time the combat stimulants felt different. Instead of the familiar rush of predatory excitement, they carried the bitter tang of something the creature had never experienced before. Doubt. Maya stood slowly, her movements fluid and controlled. The Krell's muscles tensed automatically, but the human made no aggressive moves. Instead, she walked to the depot's main entrance, stopping in the doorway to look back at the creature. You're magnificent, she said, and her voice carried genuine respect. Perfect evolutionary engineering, honed by millions of years of successful predation. But evolution is an ongoing process, and predators who stop adapting tend to become extinct. The human stepped out into the pale light of Kepler 452b's dying star, leaving the Krell alone in the depot's shadows. For long minutes, the creature remained motionless, its predatory instincts in complete disarray. Every evolutionary imperative screamed at it to pursue, to complete the hunt, to restore the natural order, but a deeper instinct, one that had kept the Krell alive through countless dangerous encounters, whispered a different message. This human was dangerous in ways that defied analysis. Hunting her might mean becoming the hunted. Slowly, carefully, the Krell began to withdraw, not in defeat, but in recognition. It had encountered something unprecedented, a species that had learned to be more dangerous than things that were physically stronger. The galaxy suddenly seemed much more complicated, much more dangerous than it had been an hour ago. As Zethkar disappeared into the colony's shadows, Maya's voice drifted across the abandoned streets, speaking into a comm unit with the same calm tone she had used in the depot. Control, this is Chun. We had a visitor. Krell, single adult, standard configuration. It's moving toward the eastern perimeter now. A pause then. Copy that, Maya. Standard response protocol? Maya watched the creature's retreating form with something that might have been respect. Negative. Let it leave. But activate the perimeter. Sensors. I don't think it'll be back, but if it is, we'll be ready. The hunt was over. But for the first time in galactic history, the predator was the one retreating. Asterisk,